Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Hi. How's everybody doing? I'm Andrew, in case you didn't recognize that, and this is Rebecca. So thank you guys so much for coming today. We're just going to I'm going to give you a couple of, I guess, tips and tricks for how I go about telling stories at a feature animation studio. And I brought Rebecca along because Rebecca is this incredible improvisation person that is going to be doing all these incredible activities with you. So you're going to kind of go through some of the lecture that I'm going to give you, and then we're going to actually do it with Rebecca. So why don't we just kind of get going and talk a little bit about why, and everybody has a great story, whether it's telling your story at home over the dinner table, or you're telling a story at work to somebody, or somebody is sitting around a cooler. You ever notice how people will gravitate towards somebody that's a good storyteller? There's a group of people around people that embellish and add things to their stories. And when you see storytellers in everyday life, there are, you go to the movies or you see a great comedian, there's a way in which they tell stories that is just interesting and engaging, and it makes you want to keep listening, right? Whether it's somebody trying to sell you a product or somebody that's got a vision for the future, or you're reading a book to your child and there's some sort of theme or lesson that's learned. Storytelling is so powerful. So why do we forget to do it at work, right? A lot of people understand how to tell a good story. So how is it that we always rely on a boring graphic of maybe a bar chart? Data is one of those things that you forget quickly, but if you wrap it in some sort of a story, then studies have shown that you will remember that. And so today we're just going to talk about a little bit of how I approach stories from an entertainment place and how to make this kind of conference room a little bit more interesting. When I was a kid, I loved cartoons, right? That's all I did when I was a kid. Back in the days before streaming, you'd have to wake up on a Saturday morning and watch cartoons, right? Looney Tunes was the one that I wanted to watch. I always loved the Looney Tunes. And I went to a school to learn how to animate. This was one of the assignments I did. It was a flour sack, keeping a flour sack alive. What I did was I put on some music of Rambo, and I started to just animate and animate this sack. And I kept going and going. Before I knew it, I had like a 2.5-minute story of this gunny sack, right? And so after I got done, there was a recruiter that came up from Warner Brothers, and I was really excited because everybody's like, Warner Brothers, oh. And in my head, I was thinking, the Looney Tunes. And he offered, he said, hey, how do you feel about coming down to Warner Brothers? We're doing this movie about Marvin the Martian. And I said, really? And all of the people, my students, even the teachers, were like, why would they ever take you? And I said, well, of course, I'd love a job. I'll do anything, right? And all the people said, I don't know how you got a job there. You can't draw that well. And so the guy told me, look, I don't care about how you draw. You're the only guy that made the flour sack into a Rambo sack. Everybody else animated it jumping off a ladder and falling. And so he told me that we'll teach you how to animate. I just want to know if you have good stories, if you could tell, we're looking for people with good ideas. And so that really stuck with me. When I went down to Warner Brothers, in my head, I had the story. I'm going to work in the studio. There's going to be people pushing, backgrounds and, in character. That was really not the case. I ended up working at the Sherman Oaks building on the 12th floor. And so that was that was the reality. And so really what I thought in my head of that kind of lore, that mythology of Warner Brothers, really turned out to just be an office building. Many years later, I was fooling around with animation, and I animated this little bug character. And somebody saw this online, and they said, hey, we're working on this movie up here at PIXAR. Why don't you send up your stuff? And so I sent it up, and I got rejected the first time, and then I thought I was going to go back to New York. But then I managed to squeak in. And I've been working at PIXAR for 20 years now, just about 20 years. And I've worked on, thank you. Thank you. So I've worked on a lot of the different films that maybe you've seen. and had a great time just finishing up Finding Dory. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to be talking about things like, what is the hook of a story? How do you keep people engaged and put tension and drama into a story? How do you put your character in the shoes? How do you put the audience in the shoes of a character? And how do you create stepping stones for somebody to follow a story so that it isn't like a dream where you just don't understand what's going on? And what is a good ending, right? And one of the great things that I discovered while working at PIXAR was Rebecca. Rebecca has been there, or has been doing
20 years.
Improv, for about 20 years. And she teaches these great classes, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her story.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Andrew. So my story. When I was a little kid, I loved playing pretend. Can you relate to that? Let me see a hand if you played pretend as a kid. And in the neighborhood that we lived in, my sister, older sister, and I knew all the other kids who would play pretend. And we had favorite games, like we had the Lost Horses game, and I learned how to run like a horse at like 3 years old. And we had, the games kids play. We played fairy tale games, and we played house. We had all these games that we played. But my parents got separated, eventually divorced. We moved, and we're suddenly in a new neighborhood. We don't know any kids, and for me, it was a lifetime of finding the kids that would play pretend with me. And we moved a lot. And in every new neighborhood, at every new school, the way I found my friends was to find the kids that would play pretend. I also found books, and that was before you could have videos of your own movies that you loved at home. So I found, I watched TV. Original series, fans, anybody? Original series, Star Trek? Yeah. Okay, so I found ways to sort of fill that in. I tried art. I tried a lot of things, but in high school, I found theater. And it took all of my imagination and put it all to work. And I fell in love with theater, and I studied theater at university, and I went out into the world, and I was directing, and I was acting, and I was a not hot blonde girl, so I didn't get the roles that I related to. And I one day, just to keep my chops, went to an improv workshop, and my life changed. I went from being an actor who got work sometimes to being an improviser who's on stage all the time. And tonight, in fact, I have a show. A performance tonight at Bats Improv in Fort Mason Center, San Francisco's preeminent improv theater company. If you want to see our show tonight, come talk to me after. I'll give you a code for a discount. So I started doing improv. I founded an improv theater company here in San Francisco 30 years ago. But my bread and butter is basically sharing the tips and tricks, the principles of improvisation with people like you. So how do improvisers go on stage with nothing but each other? How do they have the trust and mutual respect to co-create a story live on stage? And that's learnable. And how do we make stories spontaneously? And that's possible. So I'm going to get you guys to try something. Here's what you're going to do. I'd like to ask you if you would please find someone who's seated near you, one-on-one. And if you're sitting over on the edge, texting or watching some other talk to see if it's better than this one, if you would, just put that stuff away and let's interact with other human beings for a minute. Sound good? I'd like to ask you, I'm going to give you 15 seconds to find your neighbor, someone behind you, someone in front of you, one-on-one. Find a partner. Go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do you have your partner? Okay, and here's your warm-up. You guys are going to make a story, and you're going to make your story one word at a time. Don't decide what it is ahead of time. If you do, you'll screw it up. If I think, oh, my story has unicorns, but my partner, come on out, Andrew. If my partner's thinking my story has tanks and World War II, it's gonna be a screwed up story. So what you wanna do is don't have anything in mind, but let the story emerge and honor the story that's currently being told This is about mindfulness, you guys. Stay present and tell a story together right now, rather than using all those clever ideas that you have stacked up. This is about being present. Okay, so we're gonna just try one.
Okay.
Would you start?
Yeah, sure. Once
There
was
a
bug
named
Rebecca.
Oh, period. This
Insect
knew
that
life
was
exciting.
period.
However, oh, you still get a word.
Once
She
saw
a
fly,
so
she
followed
it
across
the
house,
and
ran
up
against
the
cat. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you, Andrew. We improvised that. That was made up. So maybe that's act one or the first scene, but we had the beginning of a story. That's what I would like you guys to do. So don't think about what the story is in advance, just discover it. The word once is a great way to start. The other thing is, if the sentence is over, say period, you still get a word. Got it? Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to try this. Action.
All right.
And then I give this back to you.
Awesome. I like it. It's fun.
And that's 2 minutes. If you can hear me, applaud. Let me ask you, how was that? Just shout it out. How was that? That was a unanimous fun.
All right.
Was it hard for anybody? A little challenging? I looked around as you told your stories and I saw some people doing this, going. Did you have the experience where you have an idea where the story is going and your partner says a word that doesn't seem to serve your idea? So this is the thing about collaborative storytelling, is a lot of it is about letting go of your ideas, adapting, and going with what your partner gives you. I was honestly very surprised that the bug was named Rebecca. In my mind, it was a boy bug, but you know, I adapt, I let it go. Did you ever feel like you knew exactly what word would come next and your partner said it? Did one person have that experience? Oh, thank goodness. Okay, so this is about it, you guys. That was a little under 5%. If you tell a lot of these stories, a little under 5% of the time, you'll get in the zone, it'll just work, and you and your partner are just making it happen, and it's like magic. The rest of the time, you're just slogging through, adapting to them. All right, Andrew, what comes next?
All right. Well, thank you for that. So we don't necessarily construct a movie in that fashion, but we do start with a premise, right? A premise is like kind of like the light bulb idea. And a lot of people say it's the what if of your story. You know, it could be what if toys came alive when you didn't see them, or what if this light bulb wanted to be a colored light bulb, right? There was a joke slide that was going around maybe a year ago, which said like, you know, what if toys had feelings? What if monsters had feelings? What if feelings had feelings, right? But once you get that premise kind of nailed down, then you start to kind of go to the theme. You're trying to kind of put a strong theme. A lot of the times the theme is, you know, what is the question that the filmmaker is trying to answer, or what is the message they want you leaving with at the end of the story? You know, if you read books, as many people do, there's really common themes in literature, things like man's struggle against nature or the individual versus society. Not judging a book by its cover might be the theme of Beauty and the Beast. Love is blind, the loss of innocence, right? And films, you know, if you look at the really strong films of 2015, the ones that were Best Picture nominees, you could see that all of them really have strong themes underlying, right? The Revenant is about revenge or a father's love of his son. The idea of isolation in The Martian, or Spotlight, the loss of faith in the system, right? So the theme has to be really powerful in a film. More often than not, the filmmakers who make the films have something going on in their life or bubbling up to the surface that is coming through when they're creating a story. For instance, you know, back when we were doing Monsters Incorporated, I believe Pete Docter was having a new baby, and you know, the questions of what do you do with a little baby, you know, and that may have turned into a story that led to something like Monsters Incorporated. Being afraid to let your son or daughter cross the road or chasing a ball out to the street might be a theme of fear and letting go for something like Finding Nemo. And midlife crisis. What happens when you're not on top anymore? Or you're not the hero? And what happens when you can't be the hero? But a lot of the times, I've heard a lot of the writers talk about how the theme, they'll start with a theme, but then it's like going down a dark road around a corner. And they don't necessarily know what the theme is sometimes, and they find it later on through a lot of failures, a lot of redoing things. So the theme will definitely emerge ultimately, but it's definitely good to know up front what kind of theme you want to do in a story. Rebecca is going to kind of take you through another exercise where we're going to try a little bit of theme in your story of Dreamforce.
Yeah, so what we thought is that we wanted to like leverage your experience here and use this experience this week as a template for you to make a story. When you get back to your office or your city where you live, or finish this event and you get back to your regular life, it's likely people are going to say, so how was Dreamforce? Am I right? And if you don't give it any thought, your response might be, oh yeah, it was fine. The Blue Angels were loud sometimes. Or the weather was nice. I wish I'd taken sunscreen. But unless you give it some thought, a story may not emerge. Am I right? Just a response might emerge. So what if we use this as an opportunity, this session as an opportunity for you to make a story? First question, what would you like people to know about your days at Dreamforce? What's the theme or what's the takeaway? Is the takeaway, I met these great new people at this new company and I'm going to work for them now? or is the theme, I found this app that's gonna change my life? Or is the theme, we're moving to San Francisco? What is your theme? And what I'd like to ask you to do is find someone near you. It could be the person you told a story with. It could be someone else. And have a quick conversation. You're gonna try, find a partner, tell your story. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to have a beginning, middle, and end. And it doesn't need to be one word at a time. But just a quick story at this point. But the main focus is, what is the takeaway for your story? Is that clear? This is the time for questions. If it's not, okay. So I'm gonna give you a minute to tell your story or to tell your theme or takeaway to your listener. And I'm gonna give you a minute to listen to your story. And when you're the listener, get curious and really listen, which could be challenging because you might just be thinking about your own ideas. So really listen to your partner. So what is the theme or takeaway for your story? I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes. The time begins now. Action!
All right.
What time is it right now? That's the actual time. Okay, good. Is this going well?
All right. Do I go next? I do.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Just tell them to post their takeaway to the channel, to the feed for this session.
Okay, we're gonna come back to the story and do a few different things with
What was
it.
that?
So maybe post the story at the end?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, what was that? Okay.
Just like their takeaway, just say, hey, post it to the session.
Okay, great. All right, so next thing I'm doing is world.
Awesome. It feels like a really long time has gone by because we're up here in the light.
Really?
And it's, yeah.
Not really. So I wonder if we'll end early.
We can just play more games.
Okay.
We can do yes and.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it would be better if we'll just see how it goes. Now, do you want to tell them to switch?
Not yet. Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
If you can hear me, clap with me. If you can hear me, clap with me. Guys, I'm just interrupting to say, if you haven't switched, do so now. If you have, polish and clean up those takeaways and themes and make them pretty. All right, because you have about another minute. Go.
It's always better to, talking.
It's also this. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. I wonder, are you willing to tell us what your theme is? Who's willing to shout it out in this whole big room full of people? What's your takeaway? Shout it out. There's a mic near you if you want to use it, but you could just shout it out.
Everybody has a lot of the same problems, and I can't think there were quick answers, and it's not a quick answer.
Did you guys hear that? Everybody has a lot of the same problems. You came here thinking there would be some quick answers. It's not always a quick answer. Who can relate to that? It may not be your takeaway, but that's absolutely relatable. Because of that, it would be really fun for us if you would post your themes or takeaways to the feed for this session. But you don't interrupt your process now. We'll remind you later, because now we're going to shift from theme into the next aspect of storytelling. Andrew, what is it?
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. She's a hard act to follow. A lot of times you don't necessarily start with, just a premise or an idea. A lot of times people build out a world. They start with what the feeling of the world is in a story. If you think about story triggers, something like this lake. Without even seeing an image, you immediately start to get some sort of story in your head about what that could be. Maybe it's a foggy, misty lake that's mysterious, and that story might be dark or have a lot of mystery in it. Then immediately, if you take that same setting and you change the colors, and we tell stories a lot with color, it becomes a totally different feeling, and it feels like a warm fall day, and there's a crispness in the air, and that story might be a little bit different. Hearing a train. When I was a kid, I used to go down to the tracks and I would put a coin on the tracks. How many people did that in their hometowns, right? And you get the idea of there being danger, conflict. You're immediately worried for those characters just by hearing the train in the distance and seeing those kids on the train tracks. There has to be some sort of conflict in that story, in that world. My old grandfather's desk, not that this is exactly the desk, but I would go down in the basement and it was creaky. I could smell the pipes. He had all these things on his desk, and it created a story for me. It created some sort of environment where I wanted to be. And as a kid, we would always go down there. It was very, very scary down in that basement. So whether you're telling your story in a miniature world or you're telling your story at work, and it's kind of off. This cubicles might be the space that you tell the story. You want to understand where that story is taking place and understand the world that you're dealing with when you're telling your story, whether it be in business or whatever. You want to understand how it takes place and how to embellish it with details so that people can really take away something and put those details into that world. So embellish it with those imagistic details, be authentic, create a believable world, and then stay true to the rules of that world, right? A lot of the times we see stories and we just don't buy it. We don't buy that that could ever happen. And that's really important. So let's try something.
Okay, good. So these pictures are worth 1,000 words or more. When we see an image, the world just comes into being. But you, as a storyteller, also have the power to inspire your listener to see the world in their own mind's eye. Here's an example. If I say to you, put yourself into this story. Imagine you're walking into a little village and it's snowing. There's snow on the ground. And you see, the sound is muted because of the snow. Off in the distance, you can hear a dog barking. There's smoke coming from a chimney near you. You can smell the smell of cooking from a house nearby. I'd like to ask, how deep was the snow in the picture that you just formed in your own mind? I see somebody going like this, somebody going like this, somebody going like this. So we all get our own images. What time period is this village for you? Is it the Middle Ages in Europe, or is it modern? Somebody shout it out. Where in Japan? Feudal Japan. Cool. Ooh. Was the dog a big dog or a little yappy dog? Was the smell of the food cooking? Well, if it's in feudal Japan, it might be the smell of broth or soup. If it's, I thought of Thanksgiving for some reason. So whatever the images are in your mind's eye, your storyteller has taken you somewhere where you've engaged your own imagination. And you've got the ability to do that. What we're going to try is giving you an opportunity to tell your story. You now know what your theme is. So how do you paint a picture of the world for your listener? And I'd like you to, with the same partner, describe 3 specific details about this event, about Dreamforce. 3 really specific details about any aspect of it. And they could be environmental. They could be about stuff. They could be imagistic details that are specific to the world in any way. And we'll give you a moment to tell your story, a moment for your partner to tell his or her story, and you're going to listen to your partner with curiosity because you might be inspired and you might get to steal their great ideas, which is the highest form of flattery, they say. All right, so what questions do you have? 3 imagistic details each. See if you can make yours different from your partner's, just for this exercise. And you've got about 2 minutes. I'll tell you when to swap if you haven't. Action!
Great.
The really great thing about this running a little faster is we can take a little more time. My mouth gets so dry when I present. Oh my God.
I think it's interesting that I'm kind of. That's on.
Story's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
We could do it before that. We could do it.
What do you think? On which?
I think we'll do it there.
Okay, good.
Let's see.
Give him some good time, and then we'll switch, and then we'll go. You're going to sum it up, and we'll go to character.
Once they've done world and character, the whole thing, I think it would be really cool to get a couple volunteers up here to tell their Dreamforce story.
Oh, sure. What do you mean?
To say, this is my story about Dreamforce.
At what point?
do it after the final exercise. Is it character? It's, well, I can't remember which one is the final story thing where they're taking their dream for a story and working on it. No. I don't mean that. I mean when we finish this part of, not this exercise, but working on their pitch.
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Since we're working on that.
Yeah, we could do that. Let's see. All right.
No. If you haven't switched, please do. Time to switch if you haven't. 1 minute from now.
So you're saying putting it like character, and then this is that.
What is this? This is making your character relatable. So after that, maybe 4 stories maybe?
Let's see how we do. Maybe.
See how the time is.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of stories.
Clap with me if you can hear me.
Okay.
How was that? Did your partner give you an image that inspired you? That was evocative? What's one of the images that came up that you will definitely want to tell people about when you get back home? You too. Anybody else? Yeah. What else? Any other images? What was that?
Red.
Red. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's far more than an image. That's image and theme. That's values. That's, yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to shift now from the world into another aspect of storytelling.
Yeah.
We're
Now you
getting
have
deep
the
now.
world, right? Now you've hopefully created some sort of world. Let's talk a little bit about character, right? Ultimately, sometimes the world can be a character, and that happens a lot of the times in a story where the world is literally the character. But let's talk about specifically some of the characters that we all know, right? The danger with character is that you'll fall into stereotypes and archetypes. Archetypes are those characters that are always in stories, whether you know it or not. It's just that you don't want to stick to this straight archetype. We all know that there are heroes in stories, protagonists. There are mentor characters in a story. Think about Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. Threshold guardians are the characters that kind of keep your hero from getting to the next stage of a journey, usually not stopping them, but the hero has to more often transform them, and then they become almost an ally. Heralds, the bringer of change or information. It might be somebody that says, hey, there's a storm coming, or the herald might actually be the storm. Or it could be someone saying, look, I can't take up my sword anymore. You have to continue the journey, right? Shapeshifters are in classic films. Think about Count Dracula and when the queen turns into a dragon. But in stories now, they're usually somebody that you did not realize that is good turning bad. Shadow characters are usually just the evil side of a character, not always just the bad guy, but they're there in a story to kind of challenge the hero to answer a question about themselves, usually challenging what they call their belief system, right? What they believe about the world. The kind of antagonist comes in and they kind of make that character answer those questions. And allies. Allies are characters that if a hero doesn't have a set of skills, they come in and help them. Tricksters, challenging the status quo of the world, right? The big thing with all this is that you have to know that stuff and put it in the back of your head, but it's all about specificity. You really have to know what the character in your story needs in order to transform, right? Because a lot of these stories are about transformation of the main character through the story. Some people would say, there's a famous quote that's Tolstoy said, A man goes on a journey. You know, all great literature is one of two stories. A man goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. What that means is basically like the man going on the journey will change throughout that journey, but the stranger coming to town changes the world around him. But they might change the world. You want to empathize with your characters. You want to immediately feel something. And we do that in a lot of different ways. I want you to watch this really quick clip. And it's from a really great series called The Human Animal. I show this to my animation students for body language. Listen to the story and understand what's happening here.
It's like picking your team for organized games. Being favored as a teammate is a signal of social status and group acceptance. If there's an odd number, someone gets left out. Although this may seem trivial to us, to the boy concerned, it's a moment of acute rejection and is hard to bear.
Okay. Do you care? Do you care about that little boy? Of
Yes.
course. I mean, the music helps, no doubt. But would you follow that character on a journey, right? You would, because he has something that is wounded or it's something hurting, right? Ultimately, you want to make the audience care about your characters. Someone asked, what comes first, character or story? And the answer was, well, character is story. You want to understand who that character is if they have some sort of a flaw or a wound, something that they're trying to fix. It immediately puts you in the shoes of that character and why you might want to change. More often than not in stories, you see a character or situation that's orphaned. Think about all the stories, or many stories, where the character has lost something, or it's a figurative loss, right? So they're orphaned in some way. And that's really something that hooks you in to the character. You also want to know what your character wants. Many times, they might want an external goal. If I get the treasure, then it's going to make me rich. And then a lot of the times in the story, that'll get diverted, and they meet something maybe they love, and it changes the plot of the story. You don't always just want to have an external goal. There has to be an internal want of the character in the story. That's what really hooks people. James Bond stories are a lot about just the character, fixing a big situation or going on a journey to stop something. And, they do a lot of great sequels in their action, but it's not too often that you see James Bond really change that much. So you really want to have that kind of external goal, internal as well, and sometimes kind of like an overarching goal of the entire story. Maybe they want love. Maybe they find a letter of a lover that they've been missing, and then that changes the plot line of the story. You have to have conflict. If you don't have conflict, it won't push the story forward. You'll be watching the character, and you'll get bored. It's almost like you're looking at something under a microscope. You're ahead of the character in the story, and then you lose interest really quickly. You have to know what happens if they fail. In a lot of stories, death if they fail, or some sort of literal death. So there has to be stakes to the story, and if the stakes are high, it keeps you even more engaged. You have to identify early with your character in the story. You have to get people hooked in sooner than later, because if you do it later, that person's already out, and they don't believe in what you're saying. So sometimes we also create a sentence that sums up our story. So many people call this a controlling idea or a log line. It's basically a story in a sentence. What do you think this story is? Star Wars, right. And it has elements that might be able to help you simplify your story. It's got the character, it's got the conflict, it's got a little bit of a hint of the world and how they might change in a story. And it's a really useful tool for people that are trying to tell stories is to simplify your story into one sentence. We all know this one because it's very popular, but the idea of putting some sort of a controlling idea or a log line to your story will help you guys simplify your stories. Many times people try to use the idea that the character is an orphan in Act 1. Let's kind of go through this process and look at an example. When a widower is ordered to give up his home and live in a retirement facility, right? Orphaned. Now they're a wanderer. He escapes in his home lifted by thousands of balloons, bound to Paradise Falls in Argentina to fulfill the dream of his late wife, only to land near his childhood idol who is after a rare bird. Then they become a warrior in the second to third act. Now he must risk everything, including his dream of living out the rest of his life with the memories of his late wife. And then finally, they're a martyr, where they're giving up something to save the life of a bird and a wilderness explorer, right? Which movie do you think this is? Right. You know, at the beginning of that movie, he just wanted to fly away and be by himself, right? He had lost his wife thematically. It was a story about regret, right? But by the end, now he cares about the characters. He's really caring about a boy, a bird, a dog. And he's changed his, what they call the belief system. You've changed his view. And by action, you're proving that. So let's try this. Let's model this. Yes. Rebecca is going to make you do this.
Make you? Come on. Now you get to. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, all of this information that Andrew just shared with us about character and the character's story arc. There's one piece I'd like you to focus on in bringing your own personal story of Dreamforce to life, and that piece is making your character relatable. I find that when people tell stories where they appear to have nothing to lose and everything was fantastic, I'm not quite as engaged. So somebody going, I went to Dreamforce, it was terrific. I made more friends than anyone else there. I had the best time and I saw all the best presentations and nothing ever went wrong. And I kind of go, ah. We want to make our character relatable. We want to make them human. We want to show the cracks. So what happened for you at any point? Did you get to a session late, it was too full and you couldn't get in? Or was your luggage lost? Or what happened for you that makes you relatable in your story? I want to start there, tell your story, talk about that with your partner. So what makes you relatable? What's your fatal flaw, if you will? Or what's the problem you want to overcome? Have that conversation. 1 minute. Go back and forth. Action.
Do you want to bring up the bullets?
You're right.
Okay, then we're going to get into the story game.
Actually, I was inspired. I kind of want to have them,
I think we're going to run out of time. We shouldn't.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I want a pad.
Yeah, let's do it, and then we'll do something at the end because I have to go through structure.
Good.
And then.
Oh, that's right. You got structure.
And then stirring up pearls. Yeah,
so
we got a lot more.
Maybe we'll get somebody at the very end to tell us.
Sure did. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
But we'll see how it goes. I think it's going okay.
I think so. People are doing stuff. They're talking.
I think it's serious.
All my buttons. To hear from you. What's something that came up in your story that makes you relatable? Who's got something? What was that? A race against time. That's a theme if I ever heard one. What else? Stress. Yeah. Did anybody have any stress this week? Somebody shouted something out back there that got a laugh. What was it? What? Intellectually challenged. There's a directionally. Oh my God. Those are two very different things. I'm thinking, wow, maybe you're at the wrong conference, dude. Directionally challenged, absolutely. What else? Table stealing your, did you say goobers?
Uber.
Uber. Oh, the theft of an Uber. Oh, that's no good at all. So there are things that we can reveal about ourselves that make us relatable as we tell our stories. Your story may not be a classic hero's journey. With a beginning, I was a farm boy, and a middle, I joined the rebels, and an end. But if you know what your takeaway is, if you use specific imagistic detail, and you start from a place of vulnerability as you tell your story, you're going to engage your audience, and it'll be more fun for them to listen to you. They're more likely to retain information as well. We're going to do another storytelling exercise, and we'll come back to this later. But for our next activity, I want to ask if there's somebody, we're not going to do this as a partner yet, I want to ask if there's anybody who's willing to come on stage and try something with Andrew and me. And I'll take up to 3, oh, here we go, 1, 2, I'll take you 3 over there. I'll come to you guys later. 3 people just shot their hands up. Give them a hand. Would you do the mics? Hi, your name is? This is Chrissy. Give her another hand. You are?
Sean.
Hi, Sean. This is Sean. Sean, and you are?
Islam.
Right.
Islam. Nice to meet you. This is Islam. Give him a hand. Okay. Come a little closer to the edge of the planet, and let's share 2 mics between you guys. So one for Islam and one down here.
And then here.
For, did you say Sean? You did. Okay. So hi, you guys.
Doing great.
You came on stage. We're in the light. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a story together using a structure. So rather than just one word at a time, we're going to have a sentence at a time. The game is called The Story Spine, and it was created by an improviser who's also a playwright. And it's used by improvisers all over the world and storytellers at PIXAR as well in order to make stories. And it begins with once upon a time. And then each line, the story unfolds. And Andrew will reveal more about what this entails a little later, but we're just going to try it to start out with. So the way we would do this is, Andrew's going to start with once upon a time and just begin a story. Islam, you do the next line. So you start with but one day and finish that whole thought, and we'll go down the line until we get to a moral. Sound good? Yeah. Great. So Andrew, give us a go.
Once upon a time, there was a mouse who loved steak.
Every day, that mouse would go underground in the kitchen and try to find steak.
But one day, he was very successful.
Until finally,
Let's say because of that.
because of that,
Good job.
because of that, he was able to go out and get more steak for all of his family.
Because of that, those creatures became the biggest on the block. They got fatter and stronger and more intelligent. Because?
Oh, I keep going?
Yeah, another because.
But because of that,
No, but just because.
because of that, he became a little bit too plump. And couldn't fit through the hole anymore in his house.
Awesome.
Until finally, he got an exercise wheel and kept running on it, until he lost the weight and was able to get into the hole.
And ever since then, he gets on the exercise wheel daily before going into the kitchen for his steak.
Great.
And the moral of this story is, never give up. You can always change and be successful.
Yay!
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, Islam. That was awesome and completely spontaneous. So this structure is used by improvisers all over the world. Before we tell you more about it, I'd like every one of you to have a chance to try this out. Do follow the structure. It's written this way for a reason. So join somebody. It may not be someone you've met yet, but it's someone near you. You could tell this as a threesome, if you like. A twosome, a threesome, a foursome. If someone's using an iPad next to you, lean over them and tell stories across their lap. Action! Make stories.